Another week has passed, and we have seen a ton of new track added to ArieForce One. RMC has been busy, so let's get into this week's updates. What's up guys, Dr. Coaster here on behalf of the Georgia Coaster Connection, and welcome back to another ArieForce One Construction update. Before we get started, I just want everyone to know that all photos and footage included in any of these construction updates are free to use with credit. I'd also like to thank not only Christopher, my Georgia Coaster Connection partner, but also the names you're seeing here on screen. Particularly this week, my buddies Chris from Throwquark and Michael from Coaster Skittle went out to the park together and gathered almost all the photos and footage that you'll be seeing in this video. This update wouldn't have been possible without them, so be sure to show them some love. Their pages will be linked down below. It's been a week now since I've seen footage of ArieForce One, but I was getting stuff sent to me all week long about the exciting updates that were unfolding. Last week, when Christopher made it out to the park, we saw the chili dip and barrel roll pass over the arcade for the very first time. Not only did we see supports get installed for this for the very first time, we also saw track get added. And those couple of pieces of track that I had my eye on back in the woods for some time now finally got dropped into place. We've also been seeing the outerbanked airtime hill and double up into the big drop progress in recent weeks, and this week we've got even more progress on that front. So without further ado, let's get into this week's updates. I purposely haven't checked into the parking lot in recent updates because not much was happening as it was kind of just sitting there, but Chris did gather some footage of this and I want to be sure to cover it. So here's what they found. Similar to the last time I checked it out, which was probably about a month to a month and a half ago, the parking lot has been paved and it seems to be waiting to get striped. Once this gets striped, I'm sure we'll see the rest of the parking lot get paved as well, as Fun Spot will close the outdoor park to the public from the end of December through the end of February to the beginning of March, depending on when that weekend falls. After checking in on the parking lot, Chris and Michael headed to the back of the park to check in on the progress of the barrel roll and the chili dip after seeing it go vertical last week. For months now, we've seen this ground hugger, fakey airtime hill, and zero G roll just sitting, waiting to be connected to the front of the arcade. Last week, we finally saw the barrel roll and chili dip pass over the arcade, and this week we've got even more. You can't really tell from these angles behind the arcade, but we'll get up front in just one second. It appears that most, if not all, the work behind the arcade is now complete, so we should be seeing RMC focus all their efforts up front now. One thing we can notice from this angle though is just how tall that double up and big drop are going to be, comparing it to the height of the arcade and the barrel roll, just to give us a scope of what we're looking at before we get some closer up shots here later in the video. After checking out what was good behind the arcade, Chris and Michael headed up front of the arcade to check in on the barrel roll and chili dip from some different angles. Upon first glance at this site here, there's definitely been new track added since last week, and now we've moved beyond just the chili dip. Now, we're looking at the quad down. Similar to what I said about the track and supports behind the arcade, we've been staring at the supports for the quad down for quite some time now, wondering what it would look like and what kind of angles we'd be working with. So this is the first time I really get to see that come together. Before we get to that though, let's just check in on a few more angles of the barrel roll and the chili dip. Christopher managed to get some great shots of this last week, but here's some different angles that Chris and Michael managed to get. And I know I've compared the barrel roll here to the Mosasaurus roll one or two times, okay, probably way more than that at this point, but I just rode it again a few days ago, and the way that that ride takes that Mosasaurus roll head on after a small airtime hill is going to be pretty comparable to how we're going to approach this barrel roll. Obviously it won't be over water, but we will be passing over a building in such a tight window. For those that haven't had the opportunity to experience the Mosasaurus roll yet, it's an element that many enthusiasts unanimously rank as their favorite inversion on any coaster they've ever ridden. And I've got to agree. After staring at and riding the Mosasaurus roll multiple times over the last few weeks, this is definitely going to be the most comparable experience to the Mosasaurus roll that we have, at least in the US, on a much smaller budget. You could probably be able to ride ArieForce One for $10 to $15 without having to break the bank at Universal. With the same pass over the arcade, we're also getting more of an idea of what the profiling of the chili dip will look like as it goes into the quad down. And it appears that it's going to be just as the name suggests, a dip, giving you a tiny pop of airtime rather than some straight track before heading into the quad down. While little pops of airtime like this are always appreciated, it's not going to compare at all to what we experienced in the big drop, which we're also seeing get tracked this week for the very first time. And I've got to admit, the profiling of this element isn't as steep as I was expecting it to be, but considering that you're coming out of a double up on the way into this drop, you're going to get whipped over the top no matter what. So in the back row, this element should really have some bite no matter what the angle of descent is. We've also got to keep in mind that ArieForce One is likely going to be hauling at this point, and it's about to enter the barrel roll. So it can only get so intense. This ride is going to throw one element after another at us, so even just the slightest moment to breathe might be appreciated. I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Jumping back down over the quad down now, and this appears to be sort of a series of chili dips, if you will. This isn't going to compare to the quad down that we've seen on Lightning Rod coming down the side of a mountain, where it's just absolutely yonking you out of your seat with every transition. This is going to be semi more tame, but I think the most accurate comparison here would be the airtime run to finish off Steel Vengeance. I think the hills in Steel Vengeance will be a little bit more intense, but this is probably still the best comparison. If I'm remembering correctly, Steel Vengeance ends with a run of 6 airtime hills, and with a chili dip going into the quad down, we'll be finishing with a total of 5 here. While the profiling may not look like much, if the pacing is what we expect it to be, this should still be a solid element to round out our ride on ArieForce One. Now while the big drop in quad down were receiving track this week, we didn't see much get added to the double up quite yet. It seems the RMC is working both from the arcade down towards the outerbanked airtime hill, and from the outerbanked airtime hill down towards the arcade. So the double up was kind of in limbo this week. So while the double up did not receive any track this week, you better believe the outerbanked airtime hill did. So here it is. The outerbanked airtime hill, completely finished. Chris and Michael were awesome enough to capture this outerbanked airtime hill from not one, but multiple different angles. So what you're seeing on screen here is them as they walk around the ride, checking out what it looks like from the front of the park, and from inside of it. Now if you remember from several updates ago when they updated the park map, we know that the park is going to be putting a Fun Spot sign on the side of the outerbanked airtime hill to welcome guests to the park. This will be similar to what they've done with White Lightning down at Fun Spot Orlando. So you can imagine what that's going to look like when you're looking at the side of the outerbanked airtime hill here. Okay, now let's actually discuss this element a little bit, because the profiling is absolutely insane. I've now ridden the outerbanked airtime hills on Steel Vengeance and Iron Gwazi, as well as some other coasters that have variations of the same element. And this might be the wildest looking one of them all. While the previously mentioned coasters have massive outerbanked airtime hills, this one is much smaller in scale, but seems to have equally if not steeper banking, and it's going to be taken at almost the same speed as the other ones. I'm fully expecting the ejector airtime on this element to be greater than that on the others. Sure, it's not going to be nearly as prolonged, but I think this moment of airtime could be up there on top 3 most insane moments in the entire ride. And that's something considering you have the first drop, Raven Trust Dive, longest 0G stall in North America, and the barrel roll over the arcade. This outerbanked airtime hill is bound to be some rider's favorite element. It looks like we're getting really close to seeing this ride finished, so you better believe more construction updates are coming. Christopher plans on heading out to the park this week, so we should have another video up around this time next week. Thank you all for watching. That was the 31st of many ArieForce One construction updates to come. If you don't want to miss out on more construction updates like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel, as many more of these will be coming out leading up to the opening of the ride. If you haven't already, then also be sure to follow Georgia Coast Connection over on Instagram. Your home for all things ArieForce One. If you're feeling inclined, then you can follow me as well at Dr_Coaster. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.